Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everybody. So, are you comfortable having lunch? And I think that some of participants will come in later, but we will start soon, just after the technical materials are going out. Okay, so let's start the breakout session on science and technology and civil society. Welcome to our workshop. We really appreciate for your participation and cooperation. And let me introduce myself. My name is Shoko Uchida from Pacific Asia Resource Center. This is in Tokyo. So I am a local coordinator on this working group. And let me explain about our working group on STI or digital economy. The Digital Economy Task Group, the organizer of this session, was established at C20 in this year. There was no civil society working group that addressed this issue before. Even at the beginning of preparation of C20, it was just from last June. This group did not exist yet. But in the process of preparation of C20, the importance of this issue have become much clearer. And as you may know, at the Davos meeting in January, our Prime Minister Abe stated that he would like to discuss science, technology, and innovation or digital economy in Osaka summit, which is coming soon. And he was also proposing the new term of Society 5.0, and they wanted to put this kind of issues, very, very important issue in G20, Osaka. And it was just after this speech when we launched this group in February, just 2 months ago. So this working group is a very, very new face, like a born baby. So I would like to stress again that this is a very first time for us to have this opportunity to discuss on this matter. So why should we tackle this issue right now? So as you know, there are lots of new technology and new tools is already brought to our daily life. Yeah. So is there anyone who doesn't use, who does not, who has never been, never brought at Amazon? Raise your hand. Yeah. Or is there anyone who does not use Facebook? Yeah, this kind of thing is very, very similar to us already. But technology development is progressing more widely and very quickly. And we already recognize the negative aspect by that. So we will, in this session, we will discuss how we democratize STI in order to ensure public interest, not for the profit for the big corporations like GAFA. Okay, so and I really, really hope you all grow up this group from now on, and I also hope all of you get some information and thought and how to the way of mobilization and start the researching and advocating or any other activities in your own countries or in your community. Thank you. I will introduce our moderator, Mr. Jürgen Meyer from Germany, and I asked him.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming to this packed room. It seems technology, innovation is something that not only is interesting to everybody, it also has a lot of open questions for everybody. Our panel will have 4 presentations. Altogether we have planned 50 minutes presentation and 50 minutes discussion. So if you have questions, you will have ample time to ask them. We start with Neth Dagnon, who is one of the executive directors of a group that has the name technology already in the name of the organization, the ETC group, Erosion, Technology and Concentration. Neth, you have the floor, and there is a microphone on the table in front of you, which you need because of the interpretation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I was actually surprised to see a big crowd on an STI discussion, because often in many conferences, STI attracts the least number of people. It's the most exciting topic, but somehow it actually does not attract that much attention. But for this session, as described by Shoko, there's so much to discuss because what we'll be taking up in this workshop is everything that affects our lives, and also being used as the banner of all the development discussions. I just came from the Financing for Development meeting. Eva was there, and in New York, and every single panel actually were discussing about digitalization in finance. And you'll see that in almost every sphere of the discussion in the UN, that attaching the word digital makes it new. You know, like digitalization for SDG, blockchain for SDG. So it's really big. So it's good to understand what are we facing. I will have to ask Shoko to help me with the slides. So I entitled my presentation, The Digital Economy, STI for Whom. I'll walk you through some of the basic concepts and also for us to understand what is involved and what are the key issues. I will leave much of the discussion on the privacy security issue to Valeria, and we'll just gloss over some of the general issues. And you will see a lot of this as well in the policy brief in the C20 pack. First slide, please. When we say STI, this means differently for different people. Like if you talk to people working on women's rights and reproductive rights, they will say STI is sexually transmitted infection. No, it's not. It's science, technology, and innovation. And it has become a big thing in the UN since Rio +20. In 2012, it's one of the means of implementation for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, and it has become more and more a concept that is popular across the UN. It used to be that they only discuss this as technology, but then it's now broader to include science and innovation. And often, like if you even do a search, like you will only find this part. The formal science, the formal innovation part. Science, technology, and innovation that come from the formal system, from laboratories. But in the broader sense, STI actually means different knowledge systems, and that includes that part. Indigenous knowledge, ecological knowledge, seasonal knowledge, or traditional knowledge, those are part of STI. Like I was in the 10-member group that supports the technology facilitation mechanism of the UN, and this is a big thing. Like one of the first things that we have to establish is what is STI. Because for the scientists, STI is just what comes out from the lab and institutions. So we have to be very clear that when we say science, technology, and innovation, it includes the knowledge of people that have been harnessed and passed on from generation. That's indigenous / local / traditional knowledge. Next, please. And for us in ETC, when we say STI, particularly the technology bit, it's not just about high tech. And I have to emphasize this because as you go into the discussion of STI and also digital economy, you will get the sense that what they're discussing is just this part, the high tech. And you will also see in my slides that most of my examples and the pictures are actually in agriculture because that's basically where ETC is working. And for us, if you're talking of inclusive and also participatory STI, it has to be wide tech, which means a recognition that much of the base, those that are affecting people's lives, are actually low tech or even no tech. And in the middle are the medium tech or the intermediary tech. So we call this wide tech. So next, please. And this is very, very important if you're talking of food and agriculture, because when we say no tech or low tech, that's basically what's feeding most of us. Like 70% of the world's people are actually fed by small-scale agriculture that are reliant on no tech, low tech, at the most medium tech. And only 30% are actually reliant on food that's produced by the industrial food chain or the high tech. Next, please. I'll just pass over this just to explain what is Pestoff Food Web. Next, please. So now we go to the other bits of the concept. When we say digital economy, this is very revealing because like even Wikipedia says that there's no common definition of what constitutes digital economy. In the same way, in New York, everybody was talking about fintech, financial technology, but there's no common definition of what is fintech. So loosely, digital economy is the economy that is based on digital computing technologies, which is very, very broad. Like when the World Bank did a study on how big is the digital economy, they actually even changed the tack of the paper, saying that they cannot measure what is or how much is the digital economy. So the paper that the World Bank produced in 2017 is about the digital sector. Those that concern the digital platform, all these technologies that are based on the digital platform, that's all they managed to measure. But digital economy, it's very broad, and yet this is the concept that is being pushed in platforms like G20. So, but what is that really? So, please go back, Shoko. I think key here in understanding what we're talking about is what we mean by digitalization. So of course, digitalization versus digitization, like it's interchangeably being used, but of course, if you go strictly to the language, digitization is like transforming everything to computer language, no? But digitalization makes it more an application. The way in which many domains of social life are structured around digital communications and media infrastructure. Shoko started by asking how many of us have not tried Amazon, and Hiro was saying that he's surprised. No one raised their hand. Everyone has tried Amazon, and everyone is in Facebook. So we are part of the digital economy in that sense. But since it's very broad, so everything in this room is part of the digital economy, even if we don't have a clear definition of what that is. But striking for me is that most of the definitions around digitalization and digital economy is actually revolving around the use of digital technologies to change business models. It actually revolves around how you conduct business. Oh, it's gone. Yes, it's gone. Okay. What is the next one? Okay. Okay. It's also very important, so I will have to go on, just so as not to waste our time. When we say digital economy, we're not just talking of one technology or a bunch of technology, but actually a convergences of technologies. There's a very interesting diagram that I wanted to show, just to tell you that there's actually a host of technologies that comprise the digital economy. So there are those digital-driven technologies. The key examples that we often hear, of course, is AI, no, or artificial intelligence, and of course you have automation, which is robotics. Like at the hotel that I'm staying in Akasaka, has this robot that welcomes you. I haven't interacted with it, or with him or her, but they say you can ask questions to the robot. That's a combination of like automation and of course AI, because you're actually feeding information and then the robot is processing it. There's also an element now, growing element of the digital economy that concerns converting digital to digital language genetic information. You know, the dematerialization of the material is also part of the so-called digital economy. And of course, there's a big bunch that is big bunch of technology that concerns about Earth systems engineering, you know, like geoengineering. That's also becoming part of the digital economy. And common among these different sets, like 4 sets of technologies, is that they're all reliant on big data. And in order for AI to function, in order for machine to learn, in order for deep learning to happen, you need to have a big body of data that has to be churned out by the machine and the computer, and following certain algorithms could tell you some information based on basic pattern. Now I'm lost. Okay, so that's the technology bit. It's also very important not to lose sight of who's controlling all this technology. And often in our euphoria about digital economy, and this is very clear in all the G20 documents. Yay. Okay, next please. Okay, just to say that when you say digital economy, it actually affects all the different spheres of our life, from banking, health, agriculture, and most of the examples that I will give here is in agriculture. Next, please. Next. Yeah, this is the technology convergences that I was talking about. So most of our attention is in here, like Internet of Things, but if you will look closely on how these technologies are being played out and are developing, they're actually convergences of these technologies. When you talk of automation, now like the application or use of robots in manufacturing or even in services, a lot of that is actually data-driven technologies and digital, and as I said earlier, all of them are actually reliant on big data. Even if we discuss biotechnology now, like all the new forms of genetic engineering, such as CRISPR-Cas9, genome editing, they're all dependent on digitalizing all this genetic information and pulling them together to produce big data that further help scientists in the lab also come up with new organisms that are produced through synthetic biology, etc. I will not go into those details. And we often hear, of course, blockchain, which is digital ledger, which helps, they say, for you to track, monitor, and also protect the integrity of products and processing. Next, please. Who controls? Because as I mentioned earlier, you go through all the G20 documents, none of them talk about the control issue. And for us, if we're discussing equity, we're discussing governance and democracy, the issue of control is a critical concern. Like, who controls all this information? We don't have to go into the GAFAMs, but that's clear. Like all the digital platforms are in the hands of 5 handful companies. Like if you go into the sectors, not more than 10, 12 will actually control like whole industries. And like if you look at agriculture, food and agriculture, in particular seeds and agrochemicals, they're just in the hands of 4 corporations. Next, please. Just to show you, I want to give this as an example because this is the area that I am very familiar with. Like if you talk of agriculture, this is how big the market is, and this is dwarf. If you look at this from comparing this to manufacturing and digital platform. Next, please. I also to say that it's important to mention that if you're talking of digital economy and convergences of technology, you have intellectual property rights behind all of this. All of the technologies that we're talking about and the tiny pieces that make up this technology are actually proprietary, owned by the corporations that develop them. And all of these corporations are actually interrelating with each other through cross-licensing, through joint venture, and all this partnership among companies. And just to give an example, in the food and agriculture sector, there's a lot of collaboration and cooperation among so-called competitors that allow them to use each other's technology when it comes to data genomics and precision farming, all of which actually revolve around big data. Next, please. And what is the trend? Again, I'm using agriculture as an example of how the digital technology is actually enabling companies to grow bigger and to collaborate with each other in a vertical way. So like you have Syngenta owning or buying companies that are producing drones, or you have Monsanto, which is Bayer now, owning companies that are providing digital farming tools to farmers, and all these examples. Next, please. Sorry, I have to run fast. Yes. And yeah, go back a bit. I want to mention this. And one very interesting that is coming out as well in the growing application of digital technologies in the business model is the fact that vertical integration and also corporate concentration are happening in such a rate that has never seen before. Like you have digital platforms that are now investing on food and agriculture. Like 3 years ago, who would have thought that Amazon will become a key player in food retailing? Also, you have Walmart going into online business now to be able to compete with Amazon, like Flipkart, bought by Walmart in India, and Walmart partnering with Rakuten here in Japan to be able to come up with a better and more competitive business model. And you also have companies like Microsoft going into pharmaceutical retailing, Walgreens, partnering with Walgreens. Amazon also becoming a pharmaceutical retailer by buying PillPack. And what's surprising for us as well is that you have commodity traders like ADM, Archer, Daniel, and Midlands investing on probiotics or nutrition. So there's really a big wave of vertical integration coming on right now because of control over data and also digital platforms going into non-conventional fields. Next, please. So we will see, and we are actually already seeing in many parts of the sectors, particularly in agriculture, where labor, of course, is the one that is being replaced by machines and automations, and it's more dramatic, of course, if you look into manufacturing and even in services. Just like 3 weeks ago, I was having some discussion with some labor unions in business process outsourcing in the Philippines, call centers, and they say that there's actually a big wave of termination of call center agents because of automation of call center. You know, like it's actually machines that are receiving calls and providing answers online now. Next, please. Next. So, and then all of these technologies, of course, would have impact on society, on culture, economy, environment, politics, and ethical considerations. Next, please. And I would like to use the SDGs as our metrics. No, on where do we go? On where are we going in terms of how useful or where science, technology, and innovation is bringing us in a world of the digital economy. Next, please. So like when it comes to rights consent, a lot of the concerns that we are hearing is about informed consent. Like when you are when you are using Facebook, did they ever tell us that they are actually going to sell our information. You know, that we are actually being used to provide data that become the commodity for many of the digital platforms. And as mentioned by many articles, they say that data is the new oil. No, like in the U.S., for example, the fastest growing sector in the U.S. is actually the data sector. How they are mined and how they are being sold and earning money for corporations is really a lucrative business. And part of that discussion on informed consent is, of course, the issue of respect of human rights, the right to information, consumer rights, and labor rights. And of course, I will leave this to Valeria, discuss the issue of privacy, security, and surveillance, and of course, cyber violence. I will not go into the recommendations. You will see a lot of these recommendations in the policy pack, but we'll go through the concerns using the SDGs as the metrics. Next, please. The social concerns, and we are actually facing a world where we are subtly experiencing the impacts on social relations and changing institutions brought by the digital economy. And we are in a world where you actually enter into a restaurant where families are gathering together without talking to each other because they're talking to someone on their phone or fidgeting with their laptops and their notebooks. And those are subtle things that would ultimately have impacts on how we relate to each other. And of course, all the concerns on society resulting from displacement of labor in manufacturing, agriculture, and services, and how it erodes social protection as well. The diversion of resources from diversion of resources from digital solutions is also a problem that many of us in civil society are facing. Like, I've spoken to some women working on the ground saying that very few donors would want to fund projects that have no digital attached to it. Like, you need to have something digital to be able to make your project sexy. So it's also, that results to marginalization of indigenous and local knowledge because those knowledge systems are not that relevant anymore because they're not digital. Unless you attach them to using an app or using your smartphone, then it's not attractive. Next, please. And one of the key things that also don't receive attention is the environmental impacts of the digital economy. There's rarely any discussion what is the energy requirements of all these technologies. Like when Bitcoins, I'm sure there are some in the room that have invested in Bitcoins but are too embarrassed to admit it because they lost so much money. So like when Bitcoins had its peak in 2017, the amount of energy for that year used in mining Bitcoins is equivalent to the amount of energy that Singapore used for that same year. And Singapore was something like number 34 in the ranking of countries in terms of energy use. And also the mineral requirements and extraction is not even being discussed. Because when you talk of big data, you talk of cloud storage. And cloud storage is not storage up in the cloud, but actually storage in physical infrastructures that require energy, that require physical space, and that also competes with, yes. And of course, waste and ecological footprints and impacts on the climate. Next, please. Inequality, and to me, this is one of the most important concerns that are rarely being used, like who is benefiting from the digital economy. Again, I mentioned that the top corporations that are ruling the digital platform. How does it benefit those who are left behind? How does it address the problems and realities of the poor? And how does it contribute to income, health, and nutrition? Last slide. On governance, there is nothing that governs the digital economy at the moment, global, national, and regional. Like I was in a panel 2 weeks ago when I mentioned about governance of digital economy, and somebody from the UN said that, because I mentioned that unlike a woman in Bangladesh who is facing problems on sanitation, who cannot even have a dream of facing the UN General Assembly at the UN, you have a robot named Sophia who actually had an interaction with the UN General Assembly in 2017. And the UN man said that it's his office who invited Sophia in that interaction. And when I said that that is really a queer way of actually coping with something that you don't know. Because he was saying that the UN does not know how to face, how to regulate, or how to govern the digital economy. So they invited Sophia in the UN General Assembly. And to me, that's an odd way. Like if you're actually peering out of your window and you notice something that you don't know, you don't open your door and let that thing in, right? That's basically what the UN did. Embrace something that it doesn't know and have that interaction with diplomats. Oh, are we prepared, or do we know the consequences of this technology? Of course, as I said, it's impacting everything from trade rules and the way we relate. And the main question when it comes to democracy is, does it contribute to ensuring inclusive and participatory governance? So there's so much to ask, and sorry for using up so much time, and I end my presentation there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We come straight to the next presentation. That is, no, it's not a presentation. It is actually a save from self-update. Valeria Milanes will not have a PowerPoint.
I think the microphone is not on.
Why is it not on?
Here.
The digital economy doesn't work. The digital economy apparently doesn't work all the time. So the next speaker is Valeria Milanes, director of the Association for Civil Rights in Argentina, and she will be safe from being self-updated in the middle of her speech because she has no PowerPoint. A little bit less digital is sometimes better.
Hello everybody. I will go straight to the point to make this short because, as you may notice from Ned's presentation, when we started to talk about digital concerns, it's like a medusa. It started one head and one head and one head and one head and never ended. And the point of this is go to at least some things that we talk in this edition of the C20, that it was highlighted by the speech of Prime Minister Abe at Davos in January that they mentioned, and three particular words or expressions that took my concern particularly from that speech, that are data governance, that are society 0.50 and all that lies behind that, and the WTO, like the guiding light on all these concerns. So another thing that I want to highlight is, like Ned mentioned, that digital economy has not yet a definition. It's not the only concept that appears when we talk in the digital environment and human rights and fundamental rights in digital environment that has no definition. Artificial intelligence has no definition yet. Surveillance has no definition yet. Cybersecurity has no definition yet. So all of these expressions are like Trojan horses, even smart cities, that allows to governments and private companies to make a lot of things, and we are trying right now. Civil society is a kind of newcomer in these kinds of conversations because it seems like you need magical knowledge to face that. But no, it's a bit challenging. But all of us can give these discussions if we have some ideas clear. So I want to focus on one of our major concerns, that is data. And that expression was in the speech of Minister Abe. By the way, Minister Abe is an example. All of the governments are flagging this technological optimism, like artificial intelligence will solve everything. If you take notice, in the last couple of years, last year in particular, there are a lot of national artificial intelligence national plans announced by governments, and nobody understands completely what does it mean. But it's like an open door to do a lot of things, and all of these things are based on data. When we talk about data, I'd like to make two different things. Data in general, it's, for example, data related to agriculture, data related to climate, data related to traffic, and the processes of all that data help the governments or companies to provide better services, to the governments to elaborate better public policies. We all agree on that. But the problem is that there are no transparent policies, there are no human rights assessments regarding the impact that the adoption of that technology generates. But the other thing, or the other way to talk about data that is more concerning to us is when we talk about personal data. What is personal data? The information that identifies me as a person, as Valeria, or that allowed any of you to identify me. Maybe you don't know my name, but if you know a combination of information about me, you could say, that is Valeria. See, for example, how many devices have you got? I have two here, right now. My phone, my smartphone, and my computer. Maybe if you have an intelligent watch or I don't know, whatever you have in your bags or in your pockets, maybe you have until 3 devices. And each of those devices are leaving 24/7 information about us. That if we gather and we process that information allows to identify us, where we live, even if we, for example, uses our geolocation information. If you know my routine, maybe you don't know my name, but eventually you will assume that I am the one that goes to that point to another because of my habits and because, I don't know, whatever. And why is this relevant to digital economy? The platforms that Neth mentioned, for example, social media, social platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, like even WhatsApp, which is a bit different, but all these kinds of apps are gathering permanent information about us. That information is processed, and that information nurtures advertising systems and also defines the products that we receive, and also conditions the things that we assume that we need, because it's a kind of manipulation at the end of the process. This is what is called surveillance capitalism, because we are not only surveilled by governments, but also private companies. And you see how all the things are related. So this seems kind of science fictional thing, but it currently happens. So despite how hard it is, I celebrate that we are all talking about this today. And going back to personal data, if we talk about personal data, it's important to understand that my personal data is not my possession. It's not it's something that I belong. We cannot think about personal data in commercial terms, in something that I can buy or sell. When I talk about personal data, I am talking about my very self. My biometric data, the things I like, the way I walk, the way I type, it defines me. That is why data protection and self-information, self-determination, sorry, I was thinking about that in Spanish. Information self-determination is a human rights business and is protected by several constitutions and is the basis of a lot of data protection regulations. And I highlight this because there are a lot of speech and narrative, like the one that I read between lines in Minister Abe's speech and a lot of more, that tend to confuse that. And if we do not think about that properly, we are selling ourselves in a way. And if we talk about data, it's our very selves, it's a human rights question, okay? That is what I try to push and to make everybody to understand. That is why when we talk about data and data governance, we are so clear that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is not the place to talk about data governance. In his speech, Minister Aber was clear to left personal data outside the equation, of course. But if we see how the information that we are producing is 24/7, and that information is aggregated, and that information is mixed and forms the big data sets where the algorithms are run, it's quite difficult to leave personal data aside of these kind of conversations. And the WTO is bringing into the table because the big companies that Ned mentioned are trying to pursue deregulation in different fora, no matter what, and they are failing because this thing is complicated. And they are trying to assess these kind of things through the WTO, which you know, if you are familiarized with the WTO, have a lot of problems. It's not only on digital questions, but there are a lot of things that Jürgen is an expert on that, are messy with the WTO. So the WTO is not the forum, the international forum, to address data governance. Which is the best forum? I don't have the answer to that. When I have that answer, I will solve the problem. So, right? It's not the case. We have a lot of conversations to do about that. That is necessary to have common rules and global rules, okay, but we have to reach them eventually because there are cultural differences, normative differences that need to be cleverly assessed in order to generate consensus. And the last thing I want to say is that we haven't lost from our minds that data protection is a human rights business. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, Valeria, that was a very useful contribution. We now come to the question, how can we make digital innovations work for workers? And we have Osamu Nakano, who is a board member and international relations officer of the Workers' Cooperative Union in Japan. And he has a PowerPoint presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Osamu Nakano coming from JWCU, Japan Workers' Cooperative Union. And the JWCU is a national federation of worker cooperatives. And the worker cooperatives is a kind of cooperatives of the workers, by the workers, for the workers. And I'm not sure you know workers' cooperative, but I hope, after the presentation today, I got a little bit knowledge about workers' cooperative. So by the way, I'd like to explain a little bit about cooperative. And after that, the relationship between cooperative and digital economy. Please, next. All right, first of all, I think, most of you know this kind of triangular figures. And this triangle is made by Victor Pestoff, and he was born in the United States, but he is working on welfare system or politics in Sweden. And this it's pretty clear. There's three sectors: public sectors, market sectors, and community sectors. And each sector has each principles and each economic activities of their own. And then non-government, non-profit sector is the center, red line. And in this sector, so obviously there are various organizations, and cooperatives is a part of this sector, non-profit and civil society sectors, like you guys, NPOs and NGOs. Next. And this is the basic definition and values of cooperatives by International Cooperative Alliance. And I will a little bit explain about International Cooperative Alliance, but ICA is the biggest international organization of cooperatives in the world. And the basic definition is that a cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprises. And actually, this picture describes, how cooperative is working, and this is pretty clear. Each member have to make a capital distribution, investment by their own money, And second, they use service of cooperatives. This transaction means this usage of cooperative service by the members. And third is management. So members is involved in management pretty democratic way. So for instance, workers' cooperatives, as a case of workers' cooperatives, each member, actually each workers make capital contributions. They pay their money to the cooperatives, and then they are working. So transaction in workers' cooperative means working. And moreover, they could be involved in management by the so-called principle of one member, one vote. I want to explain a little bit about this principle. By the way, so cooperatives is this kind of business enterprises, but at the same time, cooperatives has this kind of values. Cooperatives are based on the value of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. In the tradition of their founders, cooperative members believe in the ethical value of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. So this is a basic definition of what cooperative is or should be like. Please next. And there are 7 principles like these. These principles are also made and run by ICA, International Cooperatives. And the first principle means voluntary and open membership. This means cooperatives should be or is open to everybody in the world. So regardless of any kind of differences in political difference, religious difference, and sexual difference, and so forth. And second, democratic member control, one member, one vote. Each member of cooperatives has equal voting right in their General Assembly. So regardless of their amount of capital contribution. So this is most clear difference between cooperatives and private companies. Okay, so member economic participation means actually, as I told you, a member have to pay their capital contribution, and they could receive dividend from their cooperatives. And fourth, autonomy and independence. Cooperatives in essence should be independent organization from any kind of authority, political authority and religious authority, and whichever. All right, and 5 and 6 cooperatives is emphasizing or is seeking education, training, and information as important, and also cooperation among cooperatives. And finally, 7, concern for the community. This is actually a text of the 7th principle. Cooperatives work for the sustainable development of their communities through policy approved by their members. Actually, this principle was established by 1995. So in this regard, from such time, cooperatives in the world is seriously concerned for sustainable development of local community in as well as SDGs. All right, so please next. And this is short information about ICA, International Cooperative Alliance, and founded in the end of 19th century. And right now, member countries is more than 100, and we have a lot of organizations. And member individuals, cooperative member in the world is more than 1.2 billion. And actually, this number is all members of cooperatives under ICA, International Cooperative Alliance. This means there are more, cooperative members in the world. All right, so under the ICA framework, there are sectoral organizations like this: agricultural, banking, consumer, fisheries, housing, something like that. And also, ICA has several kinds of partnerships with, for instance, United Nations Economic and Social Council. Actually, ICA is the biggest NGO in the world, and ICA got, kind of partnership with ECOSOC in 1946. All right, so ICA also has a pretty strong partnership with FAO, ILO, and Montblanc meetings and so on. And this is pretty basic facts and figures. And the 300 largest cooperatives had a combined annual turnover of 2.5 trillion US dollars. And this is almost the same, GDP of Canada or Australia, something like that. And the cooperatives generate partial or full-time employment for at least 280 million individuals in the world. either in or within the scope of cooperatives. And these numbers is almost 12% of the entire employed population of the G20 countries. And the United Nations estimates cooperatives support the livelihoods of almost half of the total global population. Please next. And so in this manner, cooperatives has a very strong political and economic presence in the world. And here in Japan, cooperative movement is also pretty strong. And as you can see, so in Japan, there are various kinds of cooperative: agricultural, consumer, fishing, forestry, SME, labor banks, and something like that. And we have a member, individual member, 65 million people in Japan, here in Japan. And also we have, as for the turnover, so we have over 145 billion US dollars per year. So in this regard, please keep. I'm pretty happy if you get this kind of information and go back to your countries, Japan, and there are so many very strong cooperative movement. By the way, next. Okay, so I want to explain a little bit about the relationship between cooperatives and the digital economy. And right now, there's a certain kind of movement called platform cooperativism. Platform cooperative, this is a growing international movement for a more fairer future of work. It's about social justice at the bottom line. Rooted in democratic ownership, COP members, technologists, unionists, and freelancers create a concrete near-future alternative to the extractive sharing economy. Obviously, platform cooperatives is strongly against the so-called sharing economy. And making good on the early promise of the internet to decentralize the power of applications, protocols, and websites, platform co-ops allow households with low and volatile income to benefit from the shift of labor markets to the internet. Steering clear of the belief in one-click fix of social problems, this model is poised to vitalize people-centered innovation by joining the rich heritage and value of cooperatives with emerging internet technologies. And this ecosystem challenges the practice of sharing economy and the often misogynist win at all costs culture of Silicon Valley. The cooperative platform ecosystem ranges from alternative financing models and labor blockage for nurses, massage therapists, and cleaners to cooperatively owned online marketplace and a data protection platform for patients. So rather than posing as the solution for the quick defeat of the extractive investor-owner model, successful platform co-ops have already and continue to make a meaningful difference in the lives of those who participated in them. It's a project people can work in their lifetime, and new decentralized networks are enabling people to share their data with each other without relying on corporate cloud. So this is a basic, explanation of, the so-called PC, platform cooperativism. And in New School, United States, New York City, so there's a professor, he's Trevor Schultz, and actually he's one of the leading members of who are developing, this kind of movement, platform cooperativism. Please next. All right, so these are basic characteristics of platform cooperativism. So, lower transaction and retention cost, and surplus revenue of co-ops are transferred to the members. This is obviously right. So this is cooperatives, and 80% of co-ops survives their first 5 years compared with 41% of other business ownership models. In other words, cooperative business model has a certain kind of sustainability or religions compared with the so-called private companies. All right, many flaws within local communities. So as I told you, cooperatives is so much concerned for sustainable development of local communities. And next, protection from exploitation through ownership, transparency, control, and the higher commitment of users. And finally, prospect of data democracy. Okay, next. And these are some examples of platform cooperatives. So up and go. So actually, this application created by worker-owned digital economy cooperatives, so called Co-Labo in United States, Co-Labo. And it offers professional help service like house cleaning and child care and dog walking by those who are looking for assistance with laborers from local worker-owned cooperatives. Unlike extractive home service platforms, which take up to 30% of workers' income, so Up and Go charges only the 5% it needs to maintain the platform. This is smartphone applications. And then, if you need, some home cleaners, so you can use this application. And then, several cooperatives located in New York City. Actually, this is used in New York City, and New York City has 5 workers cooperative association, and this application is connecting such a 5 workers cooperative federation, and then worker member they can use this application in order to get their job pretty less fee. All right. So there's another example. This is taxi cooperatives. And 20% of fee which corporate ride taxi platforms extract from drivers has led some drivers to create cooperative platform across Europe and the United States. And as you can see, Italy, Austin, United States, and Denver, United States. So we have so many examples already. Taxi platform cooperatives. All right, Me Data. This is certain kind of cooperative digital platform cooperatives, cooperatives is concerned on health data collection. All right, next. So I don't have more time. So finally, please look at this figure, this comparison. Cooperative fundamentals and blockchain properties, and so clearly, there's a similarity between essence of cooperatives and the technological essence of blockchain. For instance, democratic management. So as I already told you, so democratic management, cooperative has democratic management, and each member has the equal right to vote, right? And on the other hand, we can find out democratic nature, consensus model of data recording in blockchain. And moreover, decentralized operation. So we can find out both in cooperatives and blockchain. So in cooperatives, decentralized manner of operation. And in blockchain, so increased operational efficiency. And more, this intermediation, as for cooperatives, middleman profit is eliminated as the consumers control their own supplies through cooperatives. This means, consumer cooperatives. And on the other hand, it's pretty clear, this intermediation in blockchain. So in this manner, so there are pretty, actually, cooperatives share essence with blockchain. So in this regard, it's not coincide. Cooperative is trying to include digital economy or digital technology or platform business into our business. It's not coincidental. It's a kind of natural. All right. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. We come to the last one, that is the youth perspective. Hirotaka Koike from the Japan Youth Platform on Sustainability.
Hi, hello. I'm going to speak about the digital future. I'm putting this in order to show there is not the only one. And also I'm going to speak from our perspective, but the Japanese platform for sustainability, in short, JIPS, is a platform, so we have a diverse view on this. So as you can imagine, and in the diverse, it's hard to get any consensus on this. So I'm picking up rather radical position here. So please go to the next one. So I will cover the current trend, what is the dominant digital world, and what is the different digitalization, and also what is the use in this context, mitigation strategy, adaptation strategy, and the way forward. So can we go to the next one? So what is our current trend and the popular discourses around the digitalizations? Could you go to the next? So 6 million jobs will be created between 2016 and 2025 in the logistics and electricity industries, thanks to digitalization, according to the World Economic Forum. So this is the current trend. So we say, well, there will be disruption on the labor market, there will be disruption of the current industries, but there will be more jobs coming in, so that everybody will be happy eventually, and the more GDPs will come. So I think that's a kind of the way to put this digitalization in the context. Well, people often say, well, there will be a bad aspect because there will be a change, but there's always good after all. Could you go to the next? So let's see how other things. So this is the digitalization trade and development report by the UN. It talks about benefit of digitalization to people lives are enormous. Uncertainty associated with the next digital shift call for more facts, dialogue, action, etc. But there will be more enormous opportunities coming in. A third one, and next one is, okay, so there's a survey by SAP. Respondents were asked about the top 3 influences in creating a better world for tomorrow. They talked about individuals. So they think through social media, through online platform, individuals become more influencing in the digitalizing world. This is a very important thing to be noted here in the political discourses, where traditional organizations made up with people having less influences over those who became rich by them. I mean, not by themselves, this is a very wrong perspective, but let's say claim to be great by themselves. And the last one, it's even UN Secretary General, which is sad because he was socialist at the time in Portugal. They are still the early days of the digital economy, but it has globally transformative impacts on the way we live. But in order to implement this SDGs and the 2030 agenda, we need more technology, to be used to be successful. So definitely in the current trend, we accept this digitalization as a given. And we are not questioning this per se. And we are not thinking a little bit in the broader sense that what is it actually digitalization could look like. Could you go to the next? So I want to call this is narrow-minded. We are thinking it is the only single pathway that we can take as a given fact. So can there be any alternatives? Could you go to the next? So let's think about it. The people who became so rich and so famous, so influential in the current economy, are they become by themselves? Is it digitalization is it purely separated from politics? And then looking at what Bill Gates has done, of course, he's maybe doing good, and then I cannot, say too much when some NGO here might get funding from them. But the matter of fact, which is fine because he's redistributing by himself, which is fine. But for example, there was one OS called Torrent. There will be a business Torrent which was actually used in the media industry currently, but not in the private computer market. Why? Because there was a list on this Super Article 301 to be prohibited coming into the US. So clearly, in order to create Microsoft empire in this consumer computer market, there was a policy involved in it, and then of course Japan, the US relationship, you can think about it, it's natural, right? So definitely we are not living in a way the digitalization individuals are successful in its own right. It actually is supported and created by politics. So we can definitely think something else. Go to the next. So put in the context, young people are diverse and we are talking about digitalized world. But let's think about what kind of world we live in. So this is example, mobile phone prevalences. 5 billion people, unique subscription on mobile phone. Mobile phone is not this. This is iPhone 6s, so it's a little bit old. But this is not mobile phone. Mobile phone is the one you use all days, like kind of the things you can just type and stuff. And approximately half using smartphone. So actually we are still in the ages where that half the population, majority of the, kind of 1/3 do not have anything. 1/3 is no mobile phone, and 1/3 is a smartphone and mobile phone, yeah? So that's where we live. Next, please. And even US, 70% only cell phone. So basically 70% of the population in the US do not even use a smartphone. So, I mean, I'm not sure this is the right example to picking up the US. I mean, Korea might be higher, Japan might be higher. But the point is, even in the developed countries, smartphone technology is not accessible for entire population. Go to the next. So see, this is a map, the internet use. 2/3 of the worldwide use. So when you have, or 2/3 of the world using internet, the reality is, it's not that simple. Global median is 67% of population have internet accesses, yet in Africa it's entirely white. So even though people, you know, the trick of number is that you say, oh, 2/3, it sounds like a large number of population in the entire planet, but actually it's not that simple. Could you go to the next? Also, this is the CO2 emissions. I think Ness was talking about the energy crisis. 450 million ton CO2 emissions of digital technology. This is also tricky statistics because we don't have a definition, but let's move on. But at least it was increased. And yet globally, 250 million ton decrease. So actually we are going surplus, plus, not minus, even though globally it's reducing in terms of, I mean, benefit of some technology, also benefit of the new lifestyle, etc., etc. Go to the next. So those are very diverse situations where we live in, so we cannot really talk about benefit of technology for everybody here. But in order to address these concerns and in order to really create the enabling environment for technology to be even useful for everybody, it's very important to understand that how the individual really live in and how individual life constructed around that. And without, it's absolutely impossible to have any effective policies for those who really need it. Not like, you know, people who don't really need it, but they have money. I'm skipping some because lack of time. Go to the next. So this is actually quite useful for the economists. So this is one indicator of gender. For every 1,000 female graduates, 24 have an ICT-related degree, and 6 go on to work in digital job. Next, please. Ability. 47% of disabled people are in employment compared to non-disabled people, which is 67%. So we really have a clear discrimination here. Next. Age. This is also important as the opposite side of us. Certainly, older people are less likely to use the internet. 30% in 2016, just EU, this is all European indicators, not global, sorry, I forgot to say that. That was European indicators. In 2016, just 30% of EU residents aged 50 to 74 use internet-based communication services. Well, I don't know, rest of them maybe use a landline, letter, whatever. Next, ethnicity. 61% born outside of the EU have a job, while 73% born within the EU have a job. So even just a matter of where you're from, you have a discrimination. So again, digitalization, we can talk about as if one phenomenon, but a matter of fact that depending on where people are coming from, depending on where people live in, what kind of access they have, the implications are different. So I want to go to the final point. So we need to think a little bit broader than we need to deal with digitalization. That's a mindset of adaptation. So we have a climate change, we adopt them. So that's a mindset, right? We have digitalization, we have a smartphone, we already have a Microsoft, etc., etc. So we need to adopt to make sure that they will not go so bad. Give me the last 1 minute. And that's the adaptation. But also we need to think something mitigation and the transformation. So the pathway of the trajectory of digitalization is not a single way. It's combination politics, money, and so on. So we can really think beyond that. So how can we create something else? How can we create alternative way of trajectory? So that's a question so we need to answer together, and we need to think creatively. We need to draft something forward. So last one. So food for thought. I guess this is rather policy messages. Ensuring basic services for all comes important priority because otherwise digitalization does not benefit anyone yet. Socialize risks and benefits, not either or. We cannot have socializing risks and personalizing benefits. Second, establish an intergovernmental body of innovation to eliminate harmful technology and of stopping certain type of technological development. Japan, US, and was it Israel are opposed to have a working group in the UN Environment Assembly to assess engineering technologies, which is pretty bad because we need to have a precautionary approaches. Last one, look for solution with no limelight. So I think we are all thinking about iPhone, Microsoft, etc., but those are the big limelight technology. But we have technology and the innovations as necessary on the ground at the local level with cooperatives, with small entities and the young people too. So we can look for that, and there might be a better solution. We need innovative young people, not on the global stages and they show off how great they are, Forbes under 30, whatever, blah, blah, but young people and the neighbors helping the community striving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hirotaka. That was a comprehensive ride through the digital economy of our four speakers. My original idea was to have a little debate between the speakers, but since we have now only 30 minutes left for the debate, rather than 50 as originally planned, I would probably skip that. We can continue to 3:50, so we have, yeah, that's roughly 30 minutes. Personally, my impression after listening to these presentations is always I discover that I'm actually a truly conservative person, like most people in the world, because when I hear all these innovations, innovation is all nice and good. If it's not too much, if it's not too quick, and if I also can say no to some forms of innovation, that is probably the mindset of a conservative person, and I believe a lot of people are like me. In all age groups. But if you listen to governments, especially the Japanese Prime Minister, he is truly the extreme opposite of conservative. Innovation at all costs. Innovation is good no matter what. We cannot stay the way we are. This is completely impossible. We have to change. We have to innovate all the time. In Europe, we have now companies openly calling for a so-called innovation principle to be put on the same footing as the precautionary principle, which is part of the European treaties, an innovation principle, innovation for innovation's sake. That is, for everybody who is a truly conservative person, absolutely anathema. So that is my comment, my observation. I always come to that conclusion when I listen to such presentations. My question would also be, to some extent, we have a working group that is called Science, Technology and Civil Society. I found the civil society component to be a little bit small in most of the contributions. What can we do? I mean, I also kind of ask myself, why is civil society, A, not giving this issue a higher priority? We all seem to have more important concerns, so we all complain about the digital economy, but then we go on to do the things we always do. The call for regulating the digital economy is very, very small. You read it in this or that publication, but hardly anybody is really trying a coordinated effort to do something about it. And it also seems to me the very interesting alternatives that Osamu presented, I had never heard of them, not one of them. When I look at the NGO world, my member organizations, they all use Google, Microsoft, and so on. Nobody is using any of these alternatives. We should, if we are serious with our concerns. But I think it's in most cases also a lack of knowledge. Anyway, that was my personal observations. And now the floor is free for everybody. Who wants to ask something, comment something, have an opinion on something, please. And if you also say, introduce yourself.
Thank you, speakers, and thank you for the moderators. I'm from Taiwan Alliance in International Cooperation. We call Taiwan 8. And actually, in this morning, we listen many of the speakers. They're talking about that. Corruption, transparency, accountable, but in this afternoon, I didn't hear any about this one. We heard about that, the digital. So for me, I'm very curious, or I would like to know from maybe all the participants or the speakers, how the CSO use the technology in prevention of corruption, or promote peace, or the just like a civil society, how make us more accountable of government, how we use this technology or innovation in this part. So anyone could, maybe speakers can share your experience. Thank you.
The next speaker is over there.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Vuyo from Oxfam, South Africa. I would like to ask the speakers about the increasing commodification of information that is collected on the internet, particularly information on social media that's often collected without the user's knowledge. For example, if you use Facebook or WhatsApp, and Instagram are all part of the same family of apps, or the same company. So the same company actually collects all your information and they use it on third-party platforms, and that information actually has a value to it. It's actually commodified. And there are all sorts of other ways in which our information via our use on the internet, on Google, and all sorts of other platforms is collected and is actually sold without our knowledge, and is generating profit. And often it's not even taxed, yet it's generating more income for the parent companies of those holder apps. And so I just wanted to hear from the panelists what their thoughts about that are.
So maybe one of the panelists can have a comment or two. Valeria?
I can give you an example about transparency. We are, in my organization, we are developing a tool because there is, it's an example, it's not a solution for every single non-transparent issue. There is in electoral processes, there is lack and opaque situation related to how the campaigns are financed in social media. I think that this is a problem everywhere because most of the electoral campaigns are run in social media, and the legislation is not enough. The legislation does not understand how the platform works on that. So we are developing a tool. It's in early stages, trying to gather information to analyze what are the trends. It's a tiny example, but of course requires money, requires time, requires to sit with technical people, try to build common language, because what often happens, and if most civil society organizations are integrated by lawyers, it's a problem, because lawyers and technologists have to build bridges to understand each other. And it's not only lawyers, but the difference between technical and social sciences requires a lot of conversations and to work in this multi-stakeholder approach. There is also, and I talked about this with the media, about blockchains and transparency. Blockchain has concerns also. It's something that is new, and there is a lot of talking about that that is needed to assess and to see if it's a solution for all the things that are not transparent. And I will add something about the question that lady asked related to the commoditization of information. There is something that is so far is a cliche, but it is still true. Is it free? You are the product. All the platforms work on that. That is the business model. Facebook is free, Instagram is free, WhatsApp is free. I am the product. And there is a huge problem with the brokers of data that know their identifiers, They are big companies. They sell and buy data, but the lack of common legislation or common principles make the big companies go and the big problem is the United States. The United States have no data protection or privacy laws. There are partial regulation, but the principle is that the free flow of data is the rule. And when I was talking about the WTO, it's because they are pushing deregulation. They are trying that there was no regulation at all to protect. That is why the big push between the European Union with thank you, Jürgen. The new data protection regulation that is mandatory in the European Union and which is not aligned with United States principles. So I think that, for example, the Convention 108, it could be a tool if countries start to sign the convention, which is open to all countries, because sets principles related to the human, the person itself as the subject of information. But there's a lot of conversation needed on that.
Yeah, then we have Eva.
Eva Hamstingel from Germany, Bread for the World. Just building on what was said, and I'm happy that here in the policy pack there is this statement and recommendations of the Digital Economy Task Force. Very good that this is now important. I see it too. Wanted to mention that by the last IMF and World Bank meeting in autumn in Bali, they created a new FinTech agenda. It's called the Bali FinTech Agenda, where the IMF is tabling some principles on not only promoting, as it was done in the past, but also supervising or regulating FinTech. And these are just principles, and they, this year in the spring meetings, IMF people told us that they are delighted that the Japanese presidency is taking these up and want to develop it further. So in the direction of regulating and steering a little bit, there seems to be a new political openness, and perhaps here our civil society experts should also look into this. In the future it will become a very important topic. So that's just an encouragement. And one figure which struck me, I was looking into the OECD figures, and one figure said, it was just an estimation calculation, that about 25% of the jobs will get lost only in the OECD countries, but it will be all lower level jobs. Of course, the youth and so on, they will be trained and get the million new jobs, but the existing ones, about 25% or so, would be lost.
You can now give the microphone to Maria Emilia.
Thank you. So I wanted to address your issue about technology and corruption. And at Transparency International, we really believe that we need to bring the fight against corruption to the 21st century. Because what we are seeing is that corrupt people, for instance, when it comes to illicit financial flows or money laundering, they have all the technology to move millions of dollars from one country to the other one, only pressing a button, whether countries and governments that really want to investigate, and try to enforce and punish and somehow these kind of issues, they don't even share information among themselves. I don't know if here we have some lawyers. I am a lawyer, and at least in Argentina, my country, when we want to share information with other countries, we need to write papers, ask permission, So while the corrupt people are using technology to really move very fast the money, we are making notes, like in handwriting, in order to ask permission to share information. We do believe that technology can help people, to tackle corruption in their daily lives. For instance, having access to public information. If governments start publishing in a proactive way information about infrastructure projects, that could be really very useful. But at the same time, as Valeria has said, we do believe that also technology has some risks. especially when it comes, for instance, to the financial of political campaigns, or also when many people use blockchain, as a way to launder money, and we don't really know who is behind blockchain. And just to give you a concrete example of maybe how you can use technology in a very easy way if you want to tackle corruption, there is something that is called beneficial ownership transparency, that is mainly knowing who is the real person behind a company. And many times what happens is that people say, okay, so the address of my company is, I don't know, street 123, So when you go to Google Maps and you try to find that street, you realize that maybe the place where they are saying that their company is working is actually, for instance, a beach, and there is no real building there. And this that I am telling is something real. Like, we had a politician in our country that he actually said, that the office that he was renting was in a place that when you go to Google Maps, it actually doesn't exist. And that is something that we can all do, and even government. So just to give you like an example of how we can use it.
Then you have the next question here, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the most interesting things was there was a report that was produced on how civil society is using data and technology. And that was an assessment of about 100 or so companies, or about NGOs. Interestingly, it wasn't done by civil society, it was done by the World Economic Forum. And that for me teaches me something, that for some reason, we are always trying to catch up. If even an analysis about our work is not done by us, it's done by by others. And if you listen to the conversation right now, even from my own end, a lot of these things are new for us. Yet we don't realize where we are headed. And for me, every time I hear the World Bank is starting something, I get scared. Every time the World Bank, because the World Bank has got a trajectory of always covering up on behalf of the G20s. And every time the citizens want to do something, you hear the World Bank has come up with something, we want to regulate. And then we get excited that the World Bank is doing it. And somehow then we get excited quoting the World Bank. And I think I want to make a bit of proposals here. When I see what is happening, the presentation by the ETC group, I actually get scared, because you've got companies that taking charge of the full value chain and leaving citizens almost empty. And I'm just wondering whether out of a meeting like this, we can form a sort of a movement where we're going to tell whatever the companies, you cannot own an entire value chain. You cannot own the production, and then you own the process, and then you own the product, and then you own the market. And I will be the very first one. So if anybody wants to sign up to something like that, I will be more than willing. We're about to put up that. The second quick one is, how many of us have got Android phones? What an Android phone? I know you're pretending, but whatever. There's several, because it happens to be to be the cheapest. You appreciate. Now, somehow the EU did manage about 3 or so months ago to force Google not to forcefully collect data out of Android phones, but it only applies to the EU. The minute you get out of the EU, Google is going to collect your data whether or not you use your phone, whether that phone is made in China, made in Japan, made wherever, as long as you have got Android. And I'm asking ourselves, do we realize what that means? So I think that there are very many opportunities for us as citizens, assuming we are, not just NGOs, to begin looking at critically at some of the campaigns that want to challenge the global ownership of data from a personal perspective, not necessarily from it is happening to citizens as if it is not happening to us. And I think the more I listen to this conversation, the more I get scared that we are letting business have their way, and then we are coming too late in the game to try and fight.
Yeah, Ness wants to comment on that.
I'd like to comment on 3 points from the earlier question from the lady on the increasing commercialization, commodification of data. When we're talking of that, I think we have to understand that there are different ways they are commodifying data. And the example that you gave is pretty direct, but also very, very, how do you call it, opaque, no? We didn't know that Facebook is selling our data to Cambridge Analytica until it erupted. But we also didn't know that the creepy things that we noticed, like in our computers, like you search for, like I was searching for a luggage. This is just last week on Amazon. And then I opened Facebook and opened only once a week. And I started seeing the luggage. I said, how did Facebook know that? And of course, this is about targeted advertisement. That's one way that they're earning a lot from targeted advertisement. It's creepy. Like, how did Facebook know that? And also things like data mining that you don't know about. And in agriculture, this is particularly creepy. Like when Bayer released an app where actually farmers can take pictures of diseases and also pests in their field and sending it to Bayer in exchange for something, the farmers are not actually told that those information are put in big data, in big databases that help Bayer to sell digital farming tools. Not to inform farmers that subscribe to their digital farming tools on what kind of pests and diseases are present in their farm and match it with particular pesticides or particular farming applications and farming technologies that you have to do in your farm. So there are really a lot of creative ways on how they are selling our information. And to me, this is fundamental. Like if you are concerned about rights and human rights, we have to really demand, like the transparency about how you are selling this information is really key. And I think there are a few countries that are starting to realize this. Like I would mention, for example, Germany, that started to call out, and I think there's even a call in the parliament to ban directed advertisement or focused advertisement in Facebook. But how will that progress? We don't know. And it's really up to citizens on pressuring government to push it. And as Paul mentioned, we are actually in a very reactionary mode. Like we are reacting to how they lead us. Like when WEF, the World Economic Forum, started talking about the fourth industrial revolution, that's when a lot of us realized we are in the fourth industrial revolution. When some countries haven't even seen the first or probably the second industrial revolution. So it's actually also leading the mind, and we are merely reacting. And there are, of course, dozens of calls on how to do that, but sad to say, civil society has not organized itself in terms of even reacting systematically or even providing alternatives to what we are seeing right now. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I was actually surprised that there are lots of people in this conference that opted to this workshop. Like in my experience, this is science, technology and innovation are the least attractive of all. And to me, it's a way for us to reflect on why are we this. And we at ETC actually begin to think that this is also a framing that society has led us into. Like in most cases, we are just like passive users or passive consumers of technologies. Like rarely do we even question, like why are we trapped in iPhone? Like if we were part of a conversation 20 years ago on what an iPhone should be, do you think iPhone would have developed that way? Maybe not. Maybe differently. The thing is, we are actually we are in a stage in history when we can and we have to question technologies the way they evolve. And if you are actually for democracy, that democracy should not stop in the social political sphere, but should also extend on technology. Like the kind of technologies that are being sold us we're never part of that conversation because we always leave scientists, technologists, and innovators to make that decision on behalf of us. And I think we are in that stage when we have to really stretch the application of democracy to include technology governance. And this is quite something that is beyond the discussions that we are having in many spheres. Lastly, to Eva's question, like most of the studies that we have are actually focusing on like job displacement on a technology by technology basis. Like what amount of jobs will be lost if you introduce robotics or automation in factories, and what amount of jobs will be lost if you introduce AI in particular sphere. But there is actually no economy-wide analysis of how much jobs or how much disruptions will be caused if we bring all those technologies together. Like while we're discussing robotics, displacement of human labor in factories, at the same time, there is this massive and rapid advances in the development of 3D printing. And 3D printing will actually move manufacturing from factories to homes. At the same time, you are also witnessing massive deployment of AI, of different forms of whatever you define AI or machine learning. So these different streams of technologies will actually feed into a tsunami of changes, of disruption. It may sound very gloomy, but for me, like that gloom should really transform into something that will help us define or even be more proactive in a time when we are in a defensive mood.
Osamu Hirotaka, maybe you also want to comment?
I just wanted to come back to Eva's point about the job loss. I wasn't saying that will happen. I was just saying that that is a current trend that people want to talk about, but I don't think that will come true, and I don't think there's any policy appropriately in place here to create fair transition. Let's say from current employment modality to the next one, and also we are not ready yet. I think how are we creating new social contract where the relationship with the labor, laboring as an act of conduct, also people as well as the states. So I think we need to really create, as she said, we need to really discuss, and that we should not be reacting to the current trend that created by those strong. But as she said, we need to really be creative and trying to define the way this goes, like defining trajectory we are moving forward, yeah? I think that is strongly related to the point of capital accumulations. I think now we are moving to, we are talking about those Google, Amazon, Apple, and so on as a way they're creating so much of how can say new technology and those advancement. But going back and looking at what actually this beginning was a public investment that enabled those research and development that created GPS, which is US military, touch panel, that was also a public funding. So all of those are public funded, and then the benefit became privatized, and we never get the return from it because the tax system was completely broken, thanks to them. And also we are failing, we mistrust with the government, and also lack of cooperation with them is hindering us from actually being able to force companies to do certain things, so stop doing something, pay the tax and so on. I'm relatively conservative, I think, among the young generation. I trust the government as a system. I think we really need to revitalize them in order to force and tackle the companies. It's only democratic institutions. Of course, many of them are not democratic. We know that. But that's the only social we have as a democratic system, to have a legal sovereign power to force and use violence in order to create something. And I think we can't forget that. So the really question of creating democratic institutions and then mobilizing people to be part of the system and enable certain policies that favor us is critical and necessary, and then being narrow-minded anarchists will not help us get anywhere. Thank you.
So I think quantification of data is certainly a pretty crucial problem right now. So, however, I don't think it's new, completely new phenomenon. In other words, Hiro, as Hiro pointed out, as for capital accumulation, many radical political economists have so far discussed commodification of land, commodification of labor power, and commodification of knowledge, data, or something like that, as a source of capital accumulation. So in this regard, so we should discuss not merely commodification of data, but also commodification of other such a the so-called fictitious capitals. And moreover, I think obviously contemporary digital technology has various kinds of risk. So however, all kinds of technologies has risk, right? So having a risk is not also new, for digital economies itself. So in other words, important thing I think is how to use or how to use such a technologies in a democratic manner. And moreover, obviously it's pretty important to make a recommendation, political recommendations to the government in order to push the governments to take appropriate policies and legal framework to for the giant digital platforms like GAFA. And as he points out, not only EU government, but also right now, Japanese government is trying to make a political regulation over such a giant platformers. So, however, I'm a little bit skeptical about the efficiency of such a political control over platform economies, because platform economies is deeply related, very sophisticated financial engineering, or very sophisticated political campaign and lobby or something like that. So I want to say, we, civil society organization, we should continue our recommendation over lobby or anti-GAFA campaign, something like that. So, but however, on the other hand, I believe CSO or people should create platform economy or digital business of our own. So as I explained, digital blockchain, is based, technically speaking, is based on peer-to-peer theory, right? And on the other hand, cooperatives, for instance, is based on C2C relationship. But here, C2C doesn't mean community to community, but means citizen to citizen. So in this regard, civil society organization, we should create or develop our own alternatives against such a giant platformers. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And we have now reached the end of our panel, of our workshop. I thank you all for coming in such large numbers to this workshop. I thank in particular the four panelists for their interesting contributions. I'm sure the presentations will be somehow online on the website of C20 sooner or later. And it's also actually documented on a video that is going to be on a YouTube channel of our friend here. So if you want to have the whole workshop, if you want to see it again, you can do that pretty soon. We have now half an hour coffee break, and we continue at 4:20, I think, in the big plenary.
Okay, so thank you. So we would like to thanks again for everybody. And one information for mainly Japanese participants, you can see our proposal by the Digital Task Group, as Jürgen mentioned earlier, but we translated it into Japanese. And if you want, you can take free at the entrance of this room. Yeah, so please read it, and please inform your friends or colleagues. Thank you. And the coffee break is prepared downstairs at the first, the ground floor. And the closing session will be held in the third, the upstairs. Thank you very much.